I think we've got to start with the Cattery. I mean, they were given the draw from hell, Geelong. I reckon you could have justified saying if they were 3-3, that's a good start. They've beaten Hawthorn, Collingwood, West Coast Eagles, Adelaide, Melbourne, and got beaten by the Giants after getting off to a good start. At 5-1, this is a really impressive start, Brownie.
They've been really impressive, and I think a lot of people had them sliding. A lot of people had them probably missing the 8, but they've been able to reshape and restructure their side, Jared, especially down forward, so that's been a big part of their turnaround.
Gaz, we'll talk about them in detail in just a sec, but we've got to start also and address the Eagles. GWS, Collingwood and Freo are their wins. A really impressive win against the Giants. When I saw that win, I thought to myself, this mob are dead set certainties for the grand final. And losses, big losses, to Port, Brisbane and Geelong. And yesterday, they looked as if they wanted to get on that charter plane at half-time.
Not the only team to go down to Geelong and get embarrassed like that, irrespective of where you are on the ladder. I'm not panicking as much as perhaps others are. They 3 weeks ago we sat here and said, how can we have a side win a premiership and add the likes of Petruccelli and Shepherd and one or two others into that side and not be Gaff, not be the fag favourites. They were terrible yesterday. The week before was ordinary. They have rolled Freo, who are second. They've rolled Collingwood, who are third, and they've rolled the GWS, who are fourth. So I know we're going to have a story. I know it's 6 games in and Geelong are fantastic and have done everything right. But the West Coast have had 2 shockers. There's some figures that would suggest, that they've got reason to be concerned, Rizzy, but I'm fully expecting by round 15 or 16...
Bit of hangover talk, though, today in the media. Premiership hangover talk, premature.
Yeah, it's pretty... Well, no, it's because it's legitimate, but they've got 3 weeks coming up where we're going to be sitting here, I would suspect, in 3 weeks' time and say, well, they're back on track.
Well, the coach, Adam Simpson, was pretty blunt straight after the match.
There is a lot of work to do, so I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Tonight was a poor night for almost everyone. I think we can't play our way if we can't win the ball. I don't think there's a grand plan to work out West Coast if we just beat them at the contest. I think that's everyone's focus every week. Just didn't look tough enough in most areas.
That's great, Jared.
Yeah, I mean, that's honesty.
It almost puts us out of a job here. What do we need to add to that?
Well, I think we can fill in some details. I see and hear a lot of commentators talk about contested ball, as if it's this panacea, as if it's one thing, but it's a multitude of things. And I think you can drill down into a lot of areas where they need to improve. And sitting there on the screen, ground ball, loose ball and hard ball, they're the contested balls. They are exactly what they did so well in the last 6 weeks of the season last year, and at the present time, they can't get
That's right, and to put into context, they did struggle for big parts of last year with that ground ball especially. And ground ball is, to put it into context, ground ball is probably the most important stat if you're looking for a Premier team. Usually the Premiership teams are very good at the ground ball, especially when it leaves the contest. But in September, they were the best team out of Jared, weren't they? They were fantastic. But it is old-fashioned, though. Very rarely you hear a coach publicly say, maybe the boys need to put their head over the footy. That way, we know those conversations be going on behind the scenes, and they be going on regularly, I suppose, at the moment. But very rarely you hear a coach call it out publicly, Roosie.
I think he knows there's a tipping point. There's a little bit of Hawthorn in West Coast, isn't there? I mean, Hawthorn weren't a great contested ball team, but there was a tipping point. I think Clarko recognised it. If we go back 2 years ago, contested possession 2017, they were 15th. So I think going into last year, that's why the concern was on them. They were able to turn that around and get it to 7th. So they were able to improve in that area. So I don't think they're super reliant on that stat, but I reckon that Simo's saying there is a tipping point. We've got to be reasonable at the contested ball. And he said that. He said, beat West Coast at the moment, just beat them around the ball.
But the one way for teams to get better is for individuals to get better, Brownie.
Yeah, been disappointed with Jack Darling, no doubt about it. I think last year, after about 8 or 10 rounds, we were talking about him winning in Brownlow, not only being an All-Australian, but Brownlow. Let's have a look at his drop-off this year. Career lows everywhere. Yeah, and the main one is the contested marks. So last year, averaging nearly 3 contested marks a game. He's taken 3 contested marks for the whole season now. Jack Darling's dropped off now. I'm worried that we're seeing the Jack Darling from the first half of the grand final. I want to see more of the Jack Darling from the second half of the grand final, when he stood up and he imposed himself physically on the contest. And this is the reason why he's not taking contested marks. Now, maybe you can give him an out and say he's protecting his teammate. Can't give him an out here. Zach Tui, loose man, standing in a key forward's hole. Now, Zach Tui might be allowed to do this once, but he should never return to do it a second time. Look at the contest that Jack Darling makes on him. Now, he should be absolutely crushed in that situation. He's playing with no presence at the moment. His work rate is down. I've never seen a bloke with so much speed get led to the ball the way he is. So Jack Darling, we know he's got it in it. He just needs to get back going. And you can make excuse they haven't had as many inside 50s, but he's playing without presence and with a total lack of work rate.
I want to ask you a question, Brownie, and we joke about you having coffees with players, but that's more the norm now, isn't it, than what we've seen it with Josh Jenkins, we've seen it with Taylor Walker, we've seen it with a number of key forwards. Why is that? Why are key forwards reluctant to stick the knee in the back and just run through plays? Because as damning as that vision is, we've shown that over and over and over again with key forwards. Why do you think that is?
Well, maybe they're worried, but within the rules, it's still all right to be able to play with presence and crash those packs. And I'm not calling for anything illegal there, but he's 6'4". He's a big, strong man. We've seen him play with presence like he did in the second half of the grand final, Gaz, and that's what he's really letting himself down.
There was a 2-on-1 on that one. He did get...
Oh, Gary.
We're going to look at it.
Gary, you've played that position.
Have a look. You want to have a look at it
Well,
again.
yeah. Well, let's watch it again.
Good work from the other bloke, protecting Zach too.
But do you reckon he's made any effort to hold off?
But the work...
You're saying he got pushed under a bit?
Colin Jasny, I reckon. Is that Colin Jasny with him? Is that him with him?
I take it. So, did he push back with any vigour?
No, but he worked him off. Anyway, I'm not arguing your point. I just on that particular one.
Well, you are arguing my point.
On that one, I am.
No, you are arguing my point.
Because I'm right.
No, because you're wrong. Because you played key position. That is a feeble...
It was a 2-on-1.
That is a feeble effort. Did you see Wayne Carey do it?
It was a 2-on-1. He got worked off the ball. Give some credit to Stanley or Colin Jasny.
No, look, Colin Jasny's a good defender. Don't get me wrong. But he needs to push back into Colin Jasny and create a bit more space for himself to go bang and crunch sack to him.
Moving on, Brownie.
Returns.
Moving on.
I can't believe it, mate. I cannot believe he deliberately believed it. Do you believe that? Do you believe that?
I'm just saying, give the Geelong defender credit. He worked him off the ball nicely.
The Eagles have got Gold Coast, St Kilda and Melbourne to come in the next 3 weeks, so we'll definitely be revisiting it after that. But let's talk about the Cats. Plenty has changed down there. A lot of people last year criticised Chris Scott for not having a plan B, Gary. I thought it was always a bit overstated, but he's certainly got a plan B right now.
We don't need one when you're on top of the ladder, whatever you've got going. But
they're different though, aren't they?
You look for reasons of what they're doing differently, and we've all recognised the recruiting and the changing of positions. This was a real interesting one that's come from the stat sheet, is that they've been a corridor team, particularly from the back half for a long time now. They are using the corridor 8% of the time out of their back half. That's the second lowest ever. They're using the corridor 65%, Brownie. That's the highest ever recorded out of their back half. Reason why?
I think a lot of the sides have been using the corridor a little bit more, so maybe it's part of their more conservative ball movement, just to protect if they do turn the ball over. But potentially it's a skinnier ground at Geelong. I'm not sure that's a reason, but maybe it goes to those MCG finals, Gary.
They've lost 7 of 10 at the MCG. I know Chris Scott dispelled this today pretty quickly, but the fact of the matter is they've lost 7 of 10 finals at the G. Is that anything to do with it protecting perhaps rebound, Ruzi? Are they doing it deliberately? Because that's a big number. Highest ever rebound out of their back half ever.
Yeah, look, it's probably a combination of things. I think the 6-6-6 we identified makes it harder. I don't think they've got a... I mean, Tui's a little bit different coming back in the team, but I don't think they've got a speed guy off half back. And I think it is about protecting your turnovers, and we've talked a bit about that this year. So it'll be interesting to keep a watch on that as the next 5 or 6. It is a big number.
The last premiership era for Geelong was always sheeted back to a couple of super drafts. Well, maybe in a few years' time, or maybe even in 6 months' time, we'll be talking about the super draft of 2017 for the Cats, because they didn't have early picks, but they picked gold. 22, Lockie Fogarty, we haven't seen much of him. Charlie Constable's been terrific. Tim Kelly, one of the great picks at 24. And there's a kid called Brian Myers who no one wanted to go near. I mean, very few players in the under-18s have kicked 50-plus goals. He is one of 2, and yet they couldn't get anybody to snatch him up as a bargain except for his hometown in Geelong. And there is a theory that what you do in the juniors, you do in the seniors. And there's his under-18 figures. Yep. And that's what he's doing right now with 12 months development.
And the more we watch the ground ball stuff, which you've alluded to, Brownie, we saw it a couple of times on the weekend, your ability to win that ground ball is gold. So well done to that young man. He had to work hard. Ruzi, your theory that a year in the VFL doesn't hurt you?
Oh, I think what Jared said is spot on too. I mean, it's very rare you don't see players doing the same thing in the under-18s that they do in the... But there's this thing called, he's got no upside. He's got no upside. And I've heard that many, many times from recruiters. Just give me a kid that can play and he can generally play at the next level and give him 12 months to learn the craft and just get comfortable at the level. And I think there's both those factors.
They've always been keen on drafting those smaller forward types, haven't they?
They
They
have.
just haven't been able to get much contact.
they have.
Lincoln
with their
McCarthy's
injuries.
one. He's now getting a turn up at
Gregson,
Brisbane.
Corey
Gregson
Gregson
as well.
Yeah.
Hey, Jared, how much did you bench press in your career? What was your
If
best
I got
bench press?
over into triple figures, Brownie, I was pretty pleased.
170 kilos, did you ever
Wouldn't have
get?
got even half of that, Brownie.
Reece Stanley, 170 kilos.
I'm glad you
in bench
raised
press.
him because he is one of the most underrated and
Bench presses.
unsung heroes of Geelong. He's had a lot of critics throughout the year, but there's some numbers around that just suggest how good he is. Since round 13 in 2018, he is the second best performed ruckman. Now, there'll be people falling off their chairs about this, but this guy has been doing it before injury and after injury, and has set a magnificent standard for himself so far this
Yeah,
year.
very good point, mate, Jared. And those two names there, Gawn and Grundy, I think have been they've been the proving grounds, haven't they? He's played well against those two players specifically. He's been really good the last 12 months.
Would you bench press, big fella? Big champ?
Not 170.
Would you bench press? You wanted me to ask you. Come on.
157.5 for the record.
158.
You got him indeed. Now, I'd like to talk about a bloke called Gary Ablett, but you wouldn't believe it, we've run out of time. He's been done to death, but isn't it fantastic that Gary Ablett is back playing well, and some of his
Good role for him too.
kicks inside forward 50 were unbelievable.